What if I told you a farmer deliberately brought one of Africa's most fearless and aggressive animals onto his farm, and instead of keeping them in cages, he started raising them? His neighbors thought he had lost his mind. They laughed when they saw honey badgers digging through his land. They warned him that the animals would destroy everything. Some even told him, "You're not farming, you're creating a disaster." But they didn't know what he had discovered. And months later, when the results finally appeared, those same people stopped laughing. It started with a farmer named Daniel, who owned a small piece of dry farmland surrounded by struggling crops. For years, he had battled one problem that seemed impossible to solve: pests. Rats, insects, snakes, and other animals were constantly damaging his crops. Daniel couldn't afford expensive pesticides or complicated pest control systems, so he began searching for a natural solution. During his research, he became fascinated by honey badgers. Honey badgers are famous for being incredibly tough. They have powerful claws, thick skin, and an almost unbelievable ability to defend themselves. But Daniel noticed something else. They were natural hunters, and he began wondering, what if honey badgers could become part of a farm's natural ecosystem? That idea sounded ridiculous to everyone around him. When Daniel told his neighbors he planned to raise honey badgers, they laughed. One farmer reportedly asked him, "Are you trying to farm honey or get yourself killed?" But Daniel wasn't planning to simply release wild animals into his crops. He carefully studied their behavior and created controlled areas where the animals could move safely. He built strong enclosures. He created protected zones. And most importantly, he learned how to work with the animals instead of trying to completely control them. At first, nothing spectacular happened. In fact, things seemed worse. The honey badgers dug holes. They disturbed the soil. And Daniel had to spend more money and time managing the farm. His neighbors watched from a distance, waiting for the experiment to fail. Then something strange began happening. The number of certain pests around the farm started dropping. Daniel noticed fewer signs of rodents. Some pest populations declined. And because he was relying less heavily on chemical controls, the farm's ecosystem began changing. But there was another discovery. The digging activity of the animals was disturbing and turning over parts of the soil. Daniel realized that what looked destructive could sometimes have an unexpected benefit when carefully managed. The honey badgers weren't simply animals on his farm anymore. They had become part of his experiment. And then came the moment that changed everything. Daniel harvested a section of his farm that had been struggling for years. The results were far better than he expected. His neighbors couldn't believe it. The same people who had called him crazy began asking questions. How much did it cost? How did he manage the animals? Could the system work on their farms? And most importantly, was the honey badger actually the secret? But here's the part Daniel understood that everyone else had missed. The lesson wasn't that every farmer should suddenly start raising honey badgers. It was that nature often works in systems. Sometimes the solution isn't about adding more chemicals, machines, or expensive technology. Sometimes it's about understanding an animal's natural behavior and finding a safe, controlled way for that behavior to become useful. Daniel had started with an idea that sounded completely insane, but his experiment forced everyone around him to ask a different question. What if the thing everyone is afraid of is actually part of the solution? And that is why Daniel's strangest farming experiment became the one nobody could stop talking about. Because sometimes the craziest idea on the farm is the one that makes everyone else rethink what they thought was possible.